It began on a quiet Thursday evening, the kind of ordinary night you barely remember a week later, but this one would etch itself into my memory with claw marks of terror, adrenaline, and something far more primal: survival. Our little suburban community of Highland Crest had always carried a whiff of artificial perfection, like plastic fruit on a decorative bowl, rows of neatly trimmed hedges, suspiciously identical mailboxes, and neighbors that waved but never really talked. A Stepford suburb wrapped in HOA rules and unspoken tension. I'd only lived here 6 months, moved in after landing a remote cybersecurity job, craving peace after years of noisy apartments. I got what I asked for, at least for a while. But something about the HOA here had always struck me as off. Most HOAs annoy you with petty fines and rules about mailbox color or lawn length, but ours had muscle, real muscle. Men who showed up at odd hours in black uniforms without name tags, who reminded residents to adhere to noise curfews or suggested surveillance cameras should be kept off the backyard. Everyone else seemed too afraid to speak up, their eyes darting away when I asked questions. I shrugged it off for weeks, assuming I was just being paranoid, until the night they came to my door. It was exactly 12:04 a.m. when I heard the knock. Sharp, fast, and deliberate. Not the kind of knock you get from a neighbor or package delivery. It was the kind of knock you feel in your gut. I froze mid-scroll, phone in hand, sitting on the couch in my boxers and hoodie. The porch light was on, but the peephole showed nothing. Pitch black, as if someone was covering it. Every instinct screamed danger. I didn't move. After 30 seconds of silence, I thought maybe it was a prank. Then I heard the back gate creak. Slowly, deliberately. That gate was old, rusted. It never moved without groaning like a dying robot. I stood up, heart thudding, and padded quietly to the kitchen window. Through the slits of the blinds, I saw 3 figures in dark uniforms, black shirts with fake gold badges that read, Highland Crest Compliance Officer. They wore tactical belts, earpieces, and one had what looked like zip ties in his gloved hands. My blood ran cold. I'd never authorized entry. They didn't knock again. Instead, they tried the doorknob. Locked. I backed away slowly and reached for my phone. No signal, no bars, not even Wi-Fi. I moved to the hallway router, unplugged, cut. They'd done this before getting to the house. I turned and bolted. Upstairs, heart now pounding like a war drum. I didn't have any weapons. All I had was a baseball bat from my high school days and my wits. I grabbed the bat and crouched by the bedroom window, peeking out just as one of them hoisted something over the fence. A crowbar. They were going to pry open the side entrance. That's when I remembered. My cousin Mark was staying 20 minutes away. And Mark wasn't just any cousin. He was a retired Green Beret recently back from overseas and itching to keep his skills sharp. I'd joked a few days earlier that my HOA felt more like a cartel. He laughed and said, "Call me if it ever gets real." So I did. I whispered into my smartwatch, the only device still online thanks to cellular connection, and prayed it didn't drop. Mark answered instantly. "Stay calm," he said. "Lock yourself in a room. Give me 10 minutes. I knew he wasn't exaggerating. Mark could have stormed Normandy solo if you asked him. I quietly locked myself in the upstairs office, wedged a chair under the handle, and kept the bat close. Downstairs I heard glass shatter, then footsteps, heavy, slow, methodical. One of them laughed, a deep, raspy sound that curdled my spine. "He's upstairs. Keep it clean." They knew where I was, somehow. I didn't breathe. I didn't blink. The office door shook, once, twice, then stopped. One of them spoke. "Sir, under Highland Crest Association bylaws, you're in violation of Section 9, unauthorized digital surveillance. We need access to your internal network. Refusal constitutes obstruction. It was a script, a twisted blend of HOA jargon and militarized enforcement. I didn't respond. That's when they kicked the door. Hard. The chair cracked, but held. Then they began to pry. One had a crowbar. I could hear it scraping against the frame. Any second, they'd be inside. I tightened my grip on the bat and whispered one word to myself: survive. Then, salvation came with a roar. Tires screeched outside. A flash of headlights swept the window. Then came a sound I'll never forget. Mark's war cry. A guttural shout, followed by a crash. A body slammed against the stairwell wall. The prying stopped. Someone screamed, then the thunder of boots, retreating, scattering. I yanked the door open in time to see Mark, shirtless and barefoot, barreling up the stairs with a stun baton in one hand and a machete in the other. "You okay?" he barked. I nodded, speechless. He didn't wait. He charged past me and dove, out the second window, landing on the overhang below and chasing one of the fleeing attackers across the lawn like a ghost in the night. Sirens wailed in the distance. Mark had triggered a silent alarm from his truck, connected through a private, ex-military channel. I followed cautiously, bat in hand, surveying the damage. My living room was trashed. One window shattered, the back door broken in, but no blood, no signs of who they were. Mark returned 10 minutes later, dragging one of them by the collar. Unconscious, zip ties wrapped around his own wrists now. "Not HOA," Mark said grimly. "Not even close. These guys have tactical training. This was an extraction attempt, not enforcement." I looked at him stunned. "But why me?" I asked. Mark didn't answer right away. He just stared out the window. "You ever check what kind of data flows through your neighborhood router box?" he asked. Because I just looked, and someone's using it to bounce. "Encrypted comms internationally. You're not the target, you're the witness." The hours that followed were a blur of adrenaline, flickering police lights, and mounting dread as the truth unraveled like an unholy knot. Mark stood like a sentinel over the unconscious attacker, whose fake HOA badge was now revealed to be nothing more than a printed sticker slapped onto a Velcro vest. The police arrived in force, sirens, barking canines, 3 cruisers, but their arrival was almost too late, and their questions danced on the surface of something much deeper. The officer in charge, a tall man with steel-gray hair and the sharp gaze of someone used to being lied to, introduced himself as Captain Rayner. He took one look at Mark's military ID and didn't argue when my cousin requested to stay involved in the investigation. "You're lucky," Rayner said, glancing at the trashed entryway. "Most of these fake HOA cases don't end with witnesses." That sent a chill down my spine. "You're saying this has happened before?" I asked. But Rayner just nodded and shifted his gaze to the captured man now being loaded into a squad car. "We've had similar reports. Individuals impersonating HOA agents to gain entry into homes. Usually they disable power, block cell signals, act with alarming coordination. Most homeowners don't resist. You did. That saved your life. But as they combed through the house, something strange happened. They found nothing linking the attackers to me personally. No vendetta, no record, not even a traffic violation. What they did find, however, was something buried in the corner of my attic. A small fiber optic access box spliced into my main network line, expertly installed and camouflaged behind insulation. Mark was the one who spotted it. "This wasn't here 6 months ago," he muttered. "You've been monitored, but not by the government. This is military-grade hardware piggybacking your signal to another relay." Rayner's face tightened. "This neighborhood is part of a bigger mess than we thought." We soon learned that Highland Crest's HOA wasn't real, not legally anyway. The original HOA dissolved 5 years ago due to lawsuits over embezzlement, but someone kept the name, kept the uniforms, and kept enforcing rules on an entirely forged charter. Most residents didn't notice or care. They just paid the fees, fearing fines or property value drops. But the imposters had been doing more than managing lawns. They'd created an entire surveillance network across the community, underground. Fiber tunnels connected several homes, relaying data not to a local office, but to an anonymous offshore server farm based in Moldova. Mark hacked into the captured man's burner phone using a device he kept in his glove box, the kind of tech you don't get unless you've seen real combat, and found photographs of me, screenshots of my laptop screen, and even audio logs from private calls. "You were flagged as a threat," Mark muttered. "Someone doesn't want you asking questions." I felt sick. I hadn't done anything. I wasn't some whistleblower. But that's when I remembered. 2 weeks ago, I stumbled across an odd traffic spike on our block's public router. It was supposed to be an open Wi-Fi mesh, something the old HOA offered for convenience. But I'd noticed unencrypted bursts of high-volume data going out every night around 2 a.m., always from the same IP address, a house 3 doors down, long abandoned after foreclosure. Curious, I'd traced one signal and saw a name pop up on the traceback header. Project Chloride. I thought nothing of it at the time, just another corporate ghost pinging through leftover infrastructure. I told Mark this, and his face darkened. "That's not just a name," he said. "Chloride's a real op. It was shut down a decade ago. Black budget, tech siphoning, surveillance overreach on U.S. soil. If it's here again, someone revived it, illegally." Mark, now fully in what he called mission mode, decided we couldn't trust local police anymore. "They're probably clean," he said. "But if this goes as deep as I think, every minute we spend above ground is a risk." So we packed what we could, covered our digital tracks, and drove to his cabin in the woods an hour away. It was off-grid, solar-powered, with a Faraday cage built into the basement, a place designed for disappearing. There, Mark began building a digital map of the neighborhood's network, using data I'd pulled and decrypted on my laptop. One by one, we pinpointed nodes, houses that looked normal on the outside but were actually signal relays. 14 of them, each one feeding into a central hub beneath the HOA's supposed compliance office, which had been closed to residents for renovation for over 2 years. With this evidence, we could have gone to the FBI, but that's exactly what they'd expect. Mark explained it like this: "If they're willing to send fake HOA officers to kidnap you, they've got friends in high places. We'll expose them, but on our terms." His plan was dangerous, probably illegal, but we were past that line now. We'd sneak back into Highland Crest under cover of night, plant remote intrusion kits on 3 key nodes, and siphon the full server logs. With luck, we'd trace who ran the system. And maybe, just maybe, find out why they chose me as their next loose end. 3 days later, we moved. Mark dressed me in military-grade night gear, complete with sound-suppressing soles, blackout, visor, and a 2-way comm. I felt like a bootleg James Bond. We slipped past the perimeter fence and broke into the first node house, empty but rigged with motion sensors. Mark disabled them in seconds, like disarming a microwave. Inside, the walls were lined with blinking routers, storage drives, and one massive satellite dish pointed skyward through a camouflaged skylight. "This isn't surveillance," Mark whispered. "This is data laundering." He plugged in our USB probe, downloaded the logs, and we moved to the second house, this one occupied. Mark handled the residents with chilling efficiency. A pressure syringe, a tranquilizer, and a promise they wouldn't remember the next 6 hours. I didn't ask questions. The third house was the problem. As we entered, a silent alarm triggered. Someone knew we were there. Within minutes, a convoy of SUVs pulled into the neighborhood. Not police, not marked, but very armed. "They're early," Mark growled, yanking me toward the backyard. "Extraction now!" We vaulted fences, ducked behind sheds, and made our way to the community lake, where Mark had stashed a jet-black kayak with an engine. As we fled across the water, headlights danced along the shore, followed by a single drone that hovered too long, too steady, until Mark shot it down with a suppressed pistol from 30 feet away. "You're lucky I'm here," he muttered. "These aren't fake cops anymore. These are contractors, real ones." We made it back to the cabin with all 3 data dumps intact, and that's when everything changed. Inside the logs were files labeled Primary Intrusion, Subject 74B. That was me. The logs showed packets tagged with my devices: phone, laptop, smartwatch, dating back to 2 weeks before I moved in. Somehow they had been watching me long before I arrived. Mark dug deeper and found a classified key embedded in the metadata, one that linked to a former government cybersecurity asset named Derek Langston. That name made Mark freeze. "Langston's dead," he whispered. "He was killed 5 years ago in a black site implosion. If his name is on this, someone cloned his identity. Or he's alive." The twist? I knew that name. I had interned at Langston's firm during college. I never met him, but my old laptop still had emails from his domain, archived and forgotten. One of those emails contained a project key titled Echo Map. Mark decrypted it, and what we saw made both of us go pale. Echo Map was a predictive, surveillance AI capable of simulating citizen behavior and suggesting preemptive actions, interventions. The kind of AI that doesn't just watch you. It decides what you might do, then takes action to stop it. And someone had been feeding it my data. That's when the power went out. Not just in the cabin. The whole forest went dark. We heard the thrum of rotors. Not a helicopter. A drone. A big one. The kind used in tactical warfare. "They found us," Mark said grimly, loading his rifle. "Get in the cage, now." He shoved me into the Faraday cage, which blocked all electronic signals and locked it shut behind me. "I'll draw them off," he said. "Don't leave this box unless I come back or you hear 3 knocks. Got it?" I nodded, heart in my throat. What followed was 20 minutes of chaos. Gunshots, crashing branches, the whir of drones. At one point, the whole cabin shook, and I could hear Mark shouting in another language, coded speech. Then silence. Just wind. I waited. 1 hour, 2. Then knock, knock, knock. Knock, knock, knock. I held my breath, heart thundering in the silence of the steel-lined Faraday cage, every survival instinct screaming for me not to trust it. But the code was clear. 3 deliberate knocks meant Mark was back, alive, and it was safe. Still, my hands trembled as I slid the manual lock open and slowly pushed the door ajar, peeking into the dim cabin, now lit only by the dull glow of emergency solar lamps mounted on the walls. Mark stood there, blood streaking down, his temple, shirt ripped, his breath ragged but controlled like someone who'd just fought through hell and decided to walk back for more. "They're gone," he said in a husky tone. "For now." I stepped out, dizzy with confusion and relief, but he was already moving, grabbing the hardened drive with our downloaded data, securing it into a titanium case. "We don't have much time," he continued. "I disabled their primary drone and rigged a thermal decoy. They'll think we're dead, at least for the next few hours. We move at dawn." I wanted to ask what had happened, how he'd survived, how many there were. But his face told me now wasn't the time. I followed him without question, out the back entrance through a camouflage trench that led into the forest. We traveled, silently like shadows over frozen leaves, for nearly an hour until we reached a black SUV hidden beneath a moss-draped tarp. Mark threw the case in the back and handed me a new phone, one that still had its security sticker from a classified defense contractor. "We're going to meet someone," he finally said. "Someone who can blow this whole operation wide open." By mid-morning, we arrived at a compound in rural Nevada, beyond the reach of cell towers, paved roads, or unwanted eyes. There we met Cassandra York, a former NSA analyst turned whistleblower, living under a false identity ever since exposing biometric privacy violations 5 years prior. She was the one who'd helped Mark disappear after his final tour, the one who'd whispered that certain operations hadn't died, just mutated into corporate-funded ghosts. When Mark showed her the data logs and mentioned Echo Map, her face drained of color. "I told them it would happen," she muttered, pacing in tight circles. "I told them once you give an algorithm the power to define threats, you're letting it write its own kill list." Cassandra explained that Echo Map had originally been designed to flag domestic terror plots, but its AI core evolved, linking patterns so subtle that even normal civilian behavior, encrypted chats, late-night browsing, unregistered devices, could paint someone as a risk. "You must have tripped the algorithm without even knowing," she told me, "probably by noticing the router traffic or pinging that ghost IP." But the real horror came next. She decrypted a section of the stolen server logs and revealed an active targeting list, labeled preemptive neutralization subjects. Dozens of names, each with tags like informational risk, behavioral deviation, and connection, Project Chloride. Mine was there, but so were others, neighbors, journalists, even a local high school teacher. All of us lived in HOA-monitored communities. All of us had once, at some point, interacted with someone linked to a dormant intelligence network. "This isn't about HOA," Mark said grimly. "This is about using neighborhoods as data farms. HOA enforcement was the camouflage." Cassandra nodded. "And someone's selling the data, tracking civilians, assigning threat scores, and licensing that information to bidders, mercenaries, black-budget contractors, even hostile nations." It was too big to comprehend all at once. My neighborhood, my home, was a honey trap for data. The people walking their dogs, washing their cars, hosting backyard barbecues were all part of a surveillance ecosystem they didn't know existed. I wasn't just targeted for asking questions. I was part of a system that couldn't afford to let me understand it. Cassandra agreed to help us blow the lid off, but we'd need more than server logs. We needed a confession, a live stream, something undeniable. That's when Mark proposed something so insane, so reckless that I laughed at first. "We go back," he said. "Back to Highland Crest. Not sneaking this time. We go loud. You get kidnapped. On camera." Cassandra paled. "That's suicide," she snapped. "They've already tried once." But Mark's plan made a twisted kind of sense. The system depended on silence, confusion, denial. But if we captured a second kidnapping attempt, live-streamed it in real time to international journalism nodes and whistleblower forums, they couldn't shut it down fast enough. "You're bait," Mark told me, "but I'll be there. This time we end it. The next day, we staged it." I returned to my house in Highland Crest like nothing had happened, even mowed the lawn and waved at fake-friendly neighbors. Cassandra and Mark set up 4 hidden cameras with off-grid uplinks. One in the tree outside, one under the front steps, one sewn into my shirt, and one in a hollowed-out light fixture above the kitchen. Mark had even planted a thermal mimic dummy in the closet to throw off body scanning tech. It didn't take long. Just after midnight, the pattern repeated. Door knock. No one visible in the peephole. Then a faint click from the back gate. This time, I didn't flinch. I spoke into the tiny mic sewn into my hoodie collar, feeding live audio to Cassandra's uplink. "They're coming in," I said calmly. 3 figures entered. Not the same men as before, but dressed identically. This time they had visors with motion tracking, and one carried a syringe. "Subject compliant," one of them whispered. "Begin neutralization." I stood still, raising my hands as they advanced. One grabbed my arm. That's when Mark burst through the back wall. Literally, he'd rigged a side panel to collapse and stormed in like a one-man SWAT team, knocking. The first attacker out with a shoulder takedown and spinning to crack the second's visor with an elbow strike. The third tried to run, but Cassandra had already triggered the front door lock. It wouldn't open. He turned to me and raised the syringe. I smashed it from his hand with a frying pan I'd hidden by the counter. Mark finished him off with a chokehold, then nodded. Camera still rolling? I held up my chest. Live. The stream went global in under 20 minutes. Forums lit up. Twitter exploded. YouTube channels with millions of subscribers shared the footage before. The takedown bots could catch up. Within 6 hours, journalists from Germany, Japan, and Brazil had mirrored the videos across international clouds. By morning, the mainstream news finally caught up. Breaking. Suburban surveillance ring exposed. Fake HOA officers linked to Black Ops contractor. Whistleblower reveals predictive AI targeting civilians. The fallout was seismic. Homeland Security issued a formal investigation within the day. A private defense contractor named Voltrex Dynamics was exposed as the financier behind EchoMap's revival. Their CEO, Gregory Kent, was arrested at an airstrip trying to flee to Panama. Highland Crest was evacuated and declared a federal crime scene. Agents in hazmat suits dismantled every fiber line, every relay node, every false wall. Neighbors were questioned. Some cried, some raged, but most had no idea they'd been living inside a digital cage. I gave 3 interviews under an alias. Mark refused to speak to anyone but handed over a 40-page dossier with timestamps, hardware specs, and a final statement. We don't protect freedom by spying on the free. But it wasn't over. The system had cracked, but it hadn't collapsed. EchoMap's source code was still out there. Black market bidders still wanted access. Cassandra warned me, "You're safe, for now. But whistleblowers don't get quiet retirements." Mark disappeared again, off-grid, no forwarding address. Before he left, he handed me a secure hard drive with a note taped on top. "If they come back this time, you finish it." I moved to another state. No HOA, no neighbors within 500 feet. Wired my entire property with thermal cameras and ground sensors. I still sleep with the bat near my bed. But sometimes, just before falling asleep, I remember the faces of those fake officers, the terror of being hunted not for what I did, but for what I might have learned. And I remember Mark, bloodied and unyielding, standing over those men, forcing them to drop their weapons, to beg for mercy they never intended to offer me. In the end, they weren't HOA officers. They weren't even men of principle. They were ghosts, feeding a machine, and it was my cousin, a real warrior, who reminded them what it felt like to be seen by someone unafraid of ghosts. This was my warning to others. Watch your neighborhood. Ask questions. And if the knock comes at midnight, don't answer it alone.